Welcome to my weekly spiel. Welcome to my weekly spiel. Yada yada blah blah blah. Yada yada blah blah blah. It's time for Margaret's weekly spiel. How badly is the wind blowing? You wouldn't think that wind's trying to blow the door back shut again. Wouldn't think that we're supposed to be in for a really bad storm later today. They're calling for, well, they've 100-kilometer winds, freezing rain, and all that other bullshit that we could do without. So in the meantime, I feel like I've got a lot of interesting things to talk about today. I've been listening to CBC radio, and there was a lady who was talking about trees and how important they were. And she was an expert on trees. Trees are her life. She's been out in Costa Rica. About 6 years ago, she fell out of a tree and it nearly killed her. And it caused her to kind of reevaluate her relationship with trees. She still loves trees. They're still the most important thing in her life. There's a great spirituality in our connection with trees. When you think about it, trees are everywhere in some form or another. Just about everything in this apartment is wood. These floors are wood. We got 2 different kinds of wood. This is parquet, or parquet as they call it, and this is laminate. I do not really like the feel of wood grain laminate under my feet, but it was no deal breaker. Well, these tables are wood. Oh, hey, I forgot to zoom out when I did my... yeah, these tables are wood. This table is wood. Picture frames. My Uncle Jack's carving of a rose. If he'd lived longer, he said he'd want to build me a carousel horse. And carousel horses are an excellent example of wood. Like the real wooden ones, like the antique ones, they have more, and recently carved ones made out of wood, have more personality than the metal or fiberglass kind, mainly because, well, they're made of a living, breathing organism. They used to be a tree. This is a tree in another form. It's in reincarnation. The spirit of the tree lives on in that horse in another form. And trees are very important. They give us oxygen. They give us paper, furniture. So much of what we can think of comes from trees. These doors, paper. And she was also talking about dealing with change and dealing with things that happen in life that once they've happened, your life will never be the same. And I thought that would be a great discussion topic. Like, I can think of lists of topics. That would be the subject of my book when I write it. Things that once they happen, you're never the same again. And a big one would be when Jeanette and I moved to Toronto. And like death in the family. I could go on about lists of stuff. And I think was it last night or the night before? Probably the night before, because we had no TV. We were listening to CKDO's Beach Party, and there was this song by Bobby Goldsboro I'd never heard before, but I instantly hated. Hey little woman, make up your mind. Come into my world and leave your world behind. And I thought, how selfish, narcissistic, and sexist for him to be, and presumptuous for him to, like that tone, expect her to drop everything and live with him, when you have to think like the character behind the song, or like as a person. Maybe, I guess Bobby Goldsboro was an okay guy, but if anyone were to say that, think to yourself, is your life with the man who asks you that? Or even if he doesn't, if it's just natural flow of things, your life with him an improvement or not? My life with Dave is an infinite improvement over how it used to be being single living in Toronto. He came into my life at the right time. My work environment was getting more and more toxic and abusive. I was less and less happy in Toronto. Like I moved. I had another apartment. Like within the last, I call it the womb because it's very small and I only lived there for 9 months. because I lived for about 5 years in a basement apartment with owned, never mind. And I was evicted, and the last place I lived in, that was when Dave and I started dating, and he'd never seen my old apartment. And I guess I still commuted back and forth to work, like for the first 6 months of my marriage. I'm glad I wasn't expected to give anything up, but I ended up having to walk away from my work relationship. My boss's verbal abuse got to be too much, so one day I just up and absconded when she went out to mail a letter. Very strange thing about that. She said she was going off to mail a letter, which is strange because she'd usually send me to do that sort of thing. I'm not going to go into detail about the kind of crap that she put me through that day, but I thought, I gotta get the fuck out of there. Excuse my language, this is not going to be for kids. And while she was gone, after she'd been gone for about an hour, and I was sick of phoning, sending faxes, because we had a book signing event coming up. She knew a famous author, and he was going to do a storytelling thing, and we had to invite all the daycares and yada yada yada. And I thought, enough is enough. I am getting out of here. So I grabbed whatever of my possessions I could carry. I was storing stuff in the basement of the store, but there are things that had to stay behind. A lot of major moves involved stuff that had to stay behind. And I just grabbed everything and took the next GO train back to Oshawa, and I never spoke to her again. And I've never looked back. She's phoned me back a couple times back in 2017, but I hung up when I realized it was her. It's not that I don't forgive her, it's just that I don't want her back in my life again. And you can forgive somebody and not have anything to do with them. Anyway, before we moved, I came across this precious gem. This is my first Life with Luella coloring book. I don't know how well you can see that. A simpler time. This was what, that's the cover, and copyright 1992, Margaret Hurd, that's my maiden name. And I guess I'm glad not to be Hurd anymore. My last name, I got so sick of spelling it for people. Franklin is an improvement. No offense to my family. Anyway, it was a different world back then, a simpler time. I think a lot of these, like the coloring books that I've done in recent years, they're sort of autobiographical. They kind of represent the things that I've been throughout the years. This is very simple. There's Luella. There's her friend Millie doing her nails while she's talking on the phone. There's Miles. This is like an activity book too. Like, people can use their imagination, and you can draw what's on the TV screen. And there's Cuppy and Rupert waking up Rappity Rabbit. There's Rappity Rabbit on a carousel horse. He didn't have his vest and his bow tie back then. And there's Luella on a carousel horse. And I did a couple connect the dots things. There's Miles Molecule, Millie Millicent on her reindeer. And there's a word scramble. Unscramble these letters to figure out what flavors of ice creams Cuppy has on his sundae. There's Cuppy and Rupert. And the rest I will show you another time, or you'll have to buy the coloring book to see it all. There's 15 pages altogether, and I'm going to make a quilt just like the previous quilts, or like I've done one and I've started 2 others. The next coloring book that I finish will be called Living the Dream, and there's a lot of stuff related to the pandemic in it. Anyway, I'll show you my latest projects. Here's my doggo that I did for Donna. I just have to finish hemming the edges, and I'm going to put a hanging sleeve in the back. And my Hoojiga What's It for the Ding Ding Toot Toot, the Stitch Journal. I did a miniature version of my said doggo. His name is Nick, and he's got his little what do you call this thing? Is it a possum or a weasel? Anyway, I guess that's it for now. I don't want to talk too long, otherwise YouTube won't, yada yada yada. Excuse me. Duh. I am going to phone Jeanette, and then I will loaderize this son of a gun. Thank you. Bye-bye. Be back soon. Thanks for watching Weekly Spiel. Mwah!